Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. Vince Carter got his jersey retired with the Toronto Raptors. It is well-deserved. Gregg Popovich is going to be out indefinitely due to health issues. I was wrong about the Golden State Warriors. The Colts are going to sit Anthony Richardson in favor of Joe Flacco for this season, and a lot more on today's episode of State of the Association. So often in the sports media sphere, a personality can be quick to defend their take even when they are very clearly in the wrong, and that's where I want to kind of go off and be different from that, and that is that I was wrong about the Golden State Warriors and how they would do in the absence of Steph Curry. Because I was of the belief that they would not do well without Steph Curry in his absence. But they have absolutely proved me wrong. And Buddy Hield is a great pickup for them. I thought he was going to be especially good alongside Steph. And obviously that's the main point, is to have him another elite shooter in the backcourt along with Steph Curry. But Buddy Hield, in the absence of Steph, he was just fine. Just as knockdown as ever. So shout out to Buddy Hield on that one. And Jonathan Kuminga. When Steph was in the lineup, Kuminga was playing a lot worse. But ever since then, in Steph's absence, Jonathan Kuminga has been great. Now, Kuminga, for my money, he had his real proper breakout season last year, where he really proved that he can be a good player in the league. And to start off this season, he really wasn't doing that. But in the absence of Curry, he has stepped up. He's needed to step up, and he absolutely has. So credit to Kuminga for that. And it really just shows someone else I was talking about is that this team is a little bit deeper than I had originally thought, because you have guys like Kuminga, you have guys such as Buddy Hield, who was a great pickup for them, and obviously you got the vets like Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, and then you've got other young guys like Brandon Przemski. There's some talent on this team, and I think I did acknowledge the talent when maybe we were talking about going into the year, but I didn't acknowledge it enough when I said that the Warriors would struggle in the absence of Steph Curry, because that talent has absolutely proven to be true for the Warriors in the absence of Curry, and shown that even without him, they can still stay afloat, because that was really my worry. Because even though it's early into the season, if you get off to a bad or middling start, that can kind of set the tone. Even if in the grand scheme of things, say 6 games isn't that much in an 82-game season, it can kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. Like, the Detroit Pistons of last year, a basketball team typically isn't going to be bad enough to lose 28 straight. However, the Pistons, the losses just kept mounting, and so that affects the morale too, and they ultimately broke the record for most consecutive losses in a single season. So for the Warriors, you've got to get off to a good start to the season. They absolutely have. And they could very well make the playoffs this year, led by Steph. I didn't have them making it originally, but I was definitely wrong about the Golden State Warriors, especially how they would do in the absence of Steph Curry. They proved me wrong in every asset. Some unfortunate every facet of the game. Gregg Popovich is going to be out from coaching the Spurs indefinitely due to health issues. And you just hate to see that. Obviously, in sports, a head coaching change generally isn't very positive in the first place, but especially for a legend of the game like Gregg Popovich is, and also not just being a legendary head coach, but for that franchise specifically, he has meant so much for them. But in the mastermind behind the Tim Duncan years, Gregg Popovich is an all-time great coach, and especially an all-time great Spur. You can't tell the story of the San Antonio Spurs without talking about Gregg Popovich. So I just wish him a speedy recovery and all the best for Gregg Popovich. Because you can't replace a guy like that. And as a result, you can kind of float around with an interim for the time being. But the Spurs are going to be at their full potential when Popovich is healthy and able to come back. A great mind for the game, and I think having him there, just with that great mind, is also crucial for Wemby's development. I think he has the tools and ability, obviously, as a 7'4" guy who can do pretty much anything on the court. Wemby has the tools to be a great NBA player anyways, but I think especially having Gregg Popovich there to help, who has coached great bigs in the past, having him there, I think that was really big for Wemby's development, and he'll be fine in the long run, absolutely. But for the Spurs, they're going to want Popovich back as soon as possible. Just wish him the best. Another all-time great, that is Vince Carter. He got his number 15 retired with the Toronto Raptors, the first Raptor to ever get their jersey retired. And number 15 will no doubt be immortalized forever up in the Raptors, and no doubt it deserves to be. Vince Carter, obviously, when he left Toronto, it was not on the best terms with them. But you have an all-time great player play for your franchise. you can't just not acknowledge that. And it's the same case I see it as kind of like KD leaving OKC. Eventually, KD's probably going to get his jersey retired. And it might take a while for the fan base to, accept that. Eventually, it will happen just because of the magnitude of player it is. And with Vince Carter, what stands out with him as a player is obviously his outstanding athleticism. And that's a good point. He could dunk it like no other. However, I think that also kind of does a disservice to the rest of the stuff he does, because Vince Carter is just a great all-around player, no doubt, and very well deserving of that jersey retirement for the Toronto Raptors. And you talk about his athleticism, but all time in general, he's just a great player. And of course, a tremendous podcast. Jason Tatum, back when the Celtics signed Gordon Hayward, he got on the phone with the agent. And he said, I got to get traded. I'm trying to play. And I think this story is a good example of how injuries can affect someone's career. And especially with Hayward, it's a very drastic in terms of how they affected him. And also just a moment for us to reflect on the great player that Gordon Hayward once was. Because now I think, a lot of the times, especially young NBA fans, and I'm 17, so who am I to be talking? But, even younger than me, they never got to really experience the peak of Gordon Hayward. They got to see him when he was on the Thunder and didn't play any minutes. And Hayward at one time was a great player for the Utah Jazz, an all-star, a max contract player. And over time, injuries just kind of derailed his career, and it's really unfortunate to see. Because I think Hayward, as kind of not necessarily the best playmaker for a forward, but he's a solid playmaker for his position. I think with the rise of positionless basketball and the point forward in the modern era, that Hayward, especially projecting like right now in the modern NBA, not just when he was on the Jazz back in the day, I think in 2024, a prime Gordon Hayward would be exceptional, even better than he was back when he was with the Utah Jazz. I think he could arguably get more playmaking duties because he put up decent assist numbers, nothing crazy impressive. But I think just with the ball in his hands more, he could have really been something if he was, just trained, developed to be the modern point forward in 2024. I think he had all the tools to be able to do that. And so just see the fact that he was already so good at the time, that Jason Tatum was calling his agent trying to get out of Boston back when they signed him, he was already so good, but I think he would have been even better in the 2024 NBA if he was just a little bit before his time in terms of what I think he could have been with his physical ability, and injuries would ultimately derail his career. I think ultimately he could have been even better now had injuries not gotten in the way. I think he would have fit great in the modern NBA. I talked the other day about a journalist who kind of, I believe, went too far with Joel Embiid, kind of bringing his family into the situation in regards to Embiid not playing. With, Joel saying that he wants to honor his late brother, and the reporter saying something along the lines of, Embiid's not really getting on the court to really make that honor. And Embiid named his son after his late brother. So Embiid was saying that he was going to play for his son and his late brother. But the reporter said that, Embiid wasn't getting out there on the court to really do that. And so it came out just the other day that Embiid insulted a reporter after the Philadelphia 76ers game, and it took a little bit of time to get more info out of that. It was really just a shove, no punches were thrown. Now, in a vacuum, what Embiid did, you can't really support. However, I think this is a guy that is dealing with so much from a lot of media outlets over in Philadelphia. They can be very critical of players at times, especially when either they're not playing or they're not playing up to the par of what they believe they should be. But also with this reporter himself, obviously that's why Embiid went after this one. Because you bring family into the mix, and there's no telling what happens next, because that is a soft spot for a lot of people. At the end of the day, most people's dream is to be able to raise a family and give them generational wealth, especially for an NBA player. You want to build up generational wealth for your family. So that is a very soft spot for a lot of people. And when you go there, people are going to respond a lot more dramatically, in a lot more dramatic fashion than they would if you were to simply criticize their game. So I think that's where this comes in for sure. And I don't know what the repercussions are going to be for Embiid. I think overall in a vacuum, yeah, it looks bad, but he was kind of justified in what he did in terms of defending himself and how he perceived it as an attack on his family and his character. So Embiid, he's probably going to face some type of fine, for sure, maybe a suspension for this. But I think overall, it's just a situation where a reporter went a little bit too far, and Embiid, whether it was the right course of action or not, he responded in the way that he saw best fit, and a lot of that was also probably heat of the moment, because anger and strong emotions can kind of overwhelm you at times. I think that's likely what happened with Embiid, but at the end of the day, he sought to defend his family from the criticism that really did not need to be drawn. You did not need to draw the line over to the family when you're talking about Embiid. Just keep it on the court. So for Joel, we'll see what the repercussions are going to be. I think that's going to be interesting to follow. And, he could very well end up out of Philly just because in general, not just this reporter, but so often Philly sports culture has a reputation for being toxic, and they can be very critical of their own players at times. Sometimes that's constructive, sometimes it's not. And Embiid, maybe that was when we kind of started to question if he is the right fit for a culture like Philadelphia, albeit not in the same vein as Joel Embiid and the reporter, is that of Stephen A. Smith responding to Kevin Durant's comments of him being a clown. He said, and I quote, "I got bad news for Kevin Durant. If you're expecting me to reciprocate with that kind of pettiness and childlessness, it's not going to happen. Could you stop lying, please? Who's allowed to talk about him?" End quote. Now, Stephen A. Smith is one of the biggest personalities in the sports media world, and in general, a lot of times his takes can be very bold, especially on a show like First Take, especially just modern broadcasting, right? So often takes can be sensationalized. And so Stephen A., in my opinion, for the most part, when he's out there talking, he's playing the game, because ultimately headlines are what's going to draw the most attention, especially in a market dominated by social media now. It's in the same way that highlight culture can kind of affect someone's perception of a player. What gets the most clicks is what you're going to focus on. So you focus on the highlights for something, and then in the reporting world, you kind of focus on the sensational headlines. And so Stephen A. Smith always draws a lot of criticism for some of his takes. I think ultimately he is a product of the modern sports broadcasting market, and I don't think that you can realistically call him a clown for that. And you can disagree with some of his takes because not all of us are always correct, right? And I've made a lot of dumb takes in my day, but at the end of the day, we're all just humans trying to delve into the game, and I think ultimately Stephen A. Smith is just doing the same thing. So you can disagree with some of his takes, you can disagree with the sensationalization of so often now the sports media market. However, at the end of the day, that is not the fault of Stephen A. Smith, and he molded some of his takes maybe to fit the modern media sphere. However, that is not his fault. It is a result of the circumstances around him in the overall sports broadcasting world. And as a result, Stephen A. Smith, I do not believe, is a clown. He might have some dumb takes. He might have some sensationalized headlines, but at the end of the day, that is the way that the over to the NFL. Christian McCaffrey is practicing for the first time since he's been placed on injured reserve with that Achilles injury, and he is on track to play this week. This is one of, if not the best running back in the entire league, not just for what he does running the ball, but in the passing game as well. And so with that, he's also a perfect fit for the Kyle Shanahan system, because you've got guys like Deebo Samuel that can do the same thing, except Deebo's the contrast of that. He's a wide receiver that can do a lot rushing the ball. So he's a perfect fit for the Shanahan offense over in San Francisco. And in his own right, he is an uber-talented running back. So it's going to be huge for the 49ers to get him back, because they've had a middling record to start the year. And I think a lot of that has been the loss of Christian McCaffrey. I think some of it also comes down to Brandon Ayuk not playing up to par, especially with that new contract. And that's just a result of, him not practicing with the team. But Christian McCaffrey is a huge piece of the puzzle for the 49ers. I expect that once he gets back into the lineup, things will look a lot better for San Francisco, because they've been a middling team, at least record-wise, to start off the year. And Christian McCaffrey is just a huge piece of the puzzle. Jordan Mason played good in his time as a starter, especially to start off the year. But now he's dealing with injury too, so you especially need Christian McCaffrey back. And I think the re-addition of him to the lineup is going to be huge for the 49ers. You bring CMC back, and that reopens your Super Bowl window. Things are looking up for San Francisco, for sure. With the addition of Christian McCaffrey, there's no telling how far they may go. That will especially help Brock Purdy as well. He hasn't got off to as good a start to the year as I would have expected, given his last 2 seasons of play. Everything we've seen from Brock Purdy to this point, he's been a lot more turnover prone this season, and I think having Christian McCaffrey, just a running back, you can check it down, that's going to get a lot of yards. That's going to do wonders for Brock Purdy as well, and it just unlocks the 49ers offense, takes it to a whole new level. The re-addition of Christian McCaffrey to the lineup will be huge, but Dak Prescott is not out 3 to 5 weeks. Now, on one end, this is a negative for the Dallas Cowboys because they're paying this guy $60 million, and now he's going to be injured too. And Dak hadn't got off to a good start to the year whatsoever. But ultimately, that is the guy that you want to be your franchise quarterback, despite what his play might be at times, especially in the playoffs. At the end of the day, you're paying a franchise quarterback money. You expect him to be your franchise quarterback. Even if he's got off to a bad start to the year, you don't want to see him go down. But for the Cowboys, I think this is an opportunity to kind of see what you have with other quarterbacks. Now, obviously, they're backups for a reason ultimately. But Dak Prescott, up to this point in the year, had not got off to a good start to the season whatsoever. Certainly not playing up to that $60 million contract. And CeeDee Lamb has also had a slower season. It's been a good season for sure, but a slower season than he has the last couple of years. And so I think just putting in a new quarterback into the lineup can inject some life into the Dallas Cowboys and not be a complete net negative for them. Now, you're going to roll with Dak when he comes back, just because at the bare minimum, because you're paying him all that money. So he's going to be your starting quarterback, like it or not. However, I think this could inject some life into the Dallas Cowboys and get some that offense flowing, because it wasn't flowing all that well under Dak. So just an opportunity to broaden your horizons, play with a different quarterback for a couple of weeks. And is that new quarterback going to be a long-term answer? Most likely not, especially because Dak is on this new contract. However, just inject some life into the offense, boost some morale, because Cowboys have not got off to a great start as a whole on the year haven't got off to a good start on the year as a whole, and Dak himself hasn't either. So just to inject some life into the offense, have a quarterback come in, especially backups, at least for the first week, they look pretty good coming in usually, especially over the last couple of years we've seen that. Josh Dobbs kind of situation, guy comes in for a couple of weeks, he's great, then just slowly falls off a little bit. But to just reinstill some confidence in the team, I think that the Dak Prescott injury can be a positive if the Dallas Cowboys are able to approach it right. The Colts are rolling with Joe Flacco for the rest of the season. Shane Steichen said that it's not going to be a temporary thing. Flacco is a starter for this season moving forward, and also that they expect AR to be the franchise quarterback of the future, but just not this season. And often we have seen a quarterback who is suspected to be a franchise quarterback, if they go and get benched, then often they don't respond well. And their confidence is shattered, and they never become the player that we once thought they could be, that we thought could be their ceiling. However, I think in the case of Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco puts you in the best position to win now. And for the Colts, obviously winning now isn't the most important thing. However, Anthony Richardson is a very raw quarterback. He has all the physical ability to be a great quarterback in this league, but he needs some time to sit and develop. And Joe Flacco is a veteran. He's been in the game for a long time. He's a Super Bowl champion. I believe he has a lot he could teach Richardson. Obviously, they're two very different quarterbacks. AR is a lot more mobile. However, at the end of the day, where Richardson struggles most is in actually throwing the ball, especially his accuracy. And that can be fixed. And so to bring in a guy like Joe Flacco over the offseason, I think that he can be huge for the Colts and huge for Anthony Richardson's development as this guy who's been in the league for forever now, and just be able to teach Richardson some things, because there was one point in this past game, Richardson was like 2 for 15, and that's not an exaggeration. I thought the box score was inaccurate. I thought there was a typo, but no, he was 2 for 15 at one point. And some of that was drops on receivers, yes, but this completion percentage has been a problem all year for Richardson. And I think ultimately he will turn out to be a good quarterback in this league. But I do believe that having him sit behind and learn from Joe Flacco is going to be huge for his development. I believe that is absolutely the right today's episode of State of the Association. This one wasn't my favorite in terms of flow, delivery, but we're just trying to get better each and every time. Thank you for listening. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.